Love our guests so much. Haven't spoken to him in years. I'm so happy to see that he's got a new comedy special, which comes out October 4th. It'll also be celebrated with a premiere in IMAX at the TCL Chinese Theater. I'm assuming that's the Man's Chinese Theater in Hollywood. It would be one of the greatest entertainers of our time, in my opinion. That would be one Dane Cook. How are you, Dane?
Yeah, what's going on, man? Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, so very excited to see this from you. I mean, you know, like, let's be honest, you kind of took a little bit of a hiatus, right? And we miss our Dane Cook, and now you bust out with this awesome new comedy special. How'd this whole thing come about?
I called up my director, who I worked on Vicious Circle with. Marty Kullner directed that HBO special. And I said, Marty, I think I have an idea that could be equally as epic, and it'll be a great celebration of what I can't believe, which is 30 years of doing stand-up comedy. He was like, all right, what's the idea? Where do you want to do it? I said, I want to shoot this on my front lawn. And he was like, up in the hills? And I'm like, get some drones. Let's get some IMAX quality cameras. I want to film the biggest comedy special that anybody's ever seen. I want to film the funniest special that I have ever done. And I want to present it in a way online that disrupts the entire system. And I want to do something in the never been done before business again. So that's what Above It All is, man.
That's cool. So this is actually shot in front of your house.
Yeah. So we trucked about 1,000 people on a Friday and a Saturday night this last March, and we put them all on my front lawn. They did not know they were coming to my house. They did not know they were coming to a comedy special. In fact, one guy told me after the show, one of the fans who I was chatting with on my front lawn after, he said, I got to be honest with you, man. When they took us from that parking lot and put us in this shuttle and we were driving through these dark Hollywood hills, he said, I thought I was being human trafficked.
It's good to laugh about human trafficking. So what did they tell? That was a little movie reference, by the way. But what did they tell these people?
They just said, hey, you're going to a secret Dane Cook event. And they didn't say where, They didn't say how. But I will tell you, standing up there doing my performance on my front porch and looking out not only at that beautiful view, but looking down at people that had no clue that they were part of a spectacle with myself and Marty Kullner. It was the coolest thing, probably since standing on stage at Madison Square Garden. It's the coolest moment of my career.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, you're the second comedian only to sell out Madison Square Garden. And, you know, you've always been an innovator. That's why I've always been a fan. And, you know, even, you know, like Waiting is one of my all-time. I'm still waiting for there to be either a reboot or a Waiting 2. Employee of the Month. Yeah. I loved Employee of the Month. Like, the one thing that you have that I've always really enjoyed is your style, and that is something that is never old. It's always new, and it's always relevant, and that's storytelling. And that's what I'm a fan of. That's why I like doing this podcast thing, is telling stories, and that's the basis of your comedy. But you're also an innovator. You know, you talk about how you shot this latest comedy special. Go back to when you first started. It was a MySpace thing. It was social media. You were the first comic to utilize social media in order to make yourself a big deal.
Well, yeah, I had to. Nobody else was hiring me. There was no incoming calls, and for a lot of years it was really brutal because I felt like I had this ability to entertain people at, I guess, a higher level. But the industry was not having it. I was not feeling welcome. And I remember thinking, maybe I got to like go rogue here. Maybe I have to build up my own database of fans and just work triple overtime to find where they are. And thank goodness the internet really started to blossom, because through that I built a really a global fan base that even today is the reason that I can put something like this out pretty much independently through DaneCook.com and Moment and not have to even deal with streamers or other bad contracts.
Was there anyone early in your career, and you followed a similar path to a lot of other successful and, not yet successful comedians of just grinding it out? Was there anybody that was a veteran of the business pull you aside and say, hey, look, kid, you got something special, but you're going to have to do fill in the blank, whatever that might be?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there was a lot of like old time guys, especially back where I started outside of Boston, that were like, you'd call them like local legends.
Yeah.
And there was one in particular. I remember this guy pulling me aside. His name was Ed, and Ed was like this great local comic. He said, he goes, kid, what's your goal? And I was, at this point, if I'm being very honest, I was not a great comic. I had a couple of funny bits, and then everything else was like really ragtag. And he goes, what's your goal, kid? And I said, I want to someday be a household name. I remember I said, Ed, I want to be a household name. And he looked at me and he goes, well, you should change your name to Scrubby Bubbles. At that point, there was no real path forward. To be honest, it was just guys like Ed and some of these other great mentors saying, if you really want to have a chance at having any kind of career, you need to be exceptional. Nobody just makes it in comedy just because they're funny. And if I'm going to be really straight up with you guys, part of why I did this comedy special on my own, self-financed it, did the whole thing from scratch, is I think a lot of these streamers are doing a disservice, and they're putting comics that are not quite ready, and they're giving them a moment, and it's not a moment to shine. It's almost like a moment to seem mediocre. And some of these comics are great live performers. I know, I'm not going to name it, I know who they are. But when I see some of the schlock that some of the streamers are putting up, it made me go, I don't want to go down. I don't care how much money they say you can make. I don't care about that. I want to put out something that people in 15 years from now are still wanting to talk about, like we can look back and talk about some cool stuff now.
Do you think that when the streamers are putting this, and I'm assuming you're talking about like the Netflixes and the Amazons and whatnot, but because the comics don't have the creative freedom in the editing room, or they're kind of being force fed to say, hey, look, let's look over what you're going to say. We don't really want to put that on there. It's just not good.
Right.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll use Andrew Schultz as such a great, talk about like success in going a route of, they didn't want to let him at Amazon speak his act the way he wanted to share with his fans because of whatever they said. It was too shocking. And he took it back. He paid them back the money they were going to give him, and he did it independently. And not only was that better for his pocket, but more importantly, I think it was better because his integrity was intact with his fans. And what I'm saying is, if you're a young comic and they throw a little bit of cash at you, and then a contract that's way too long, and then you lose control of your IP, your intellectual property, you're going to chase residuals for the rest of your life. By the way, spoiler alert, you're never going to get paid. I know, we all know. And then you're going to watch that special and go, that editor wasn't really a fan. That director maybe wasn't the best person for me. That shirt that I wore, man, I wish I had a stylist. It all comes back to theme. Great comedy specials and great comedy aren't just great because of the funny words. They're great because there's a look and aesthetic. And when you watch Above It All, I promise you this, even if you're not a fan of mine, even if you're like, I like comedy, or I like Dane Cook, or if you love me, you're going to go nuts. And if you don't, you're still going to watch and go, this is one of the coolest looking things that I've ever seen.
Because it's creative. People, I was given advice about 10 years ago by a very successful man, and he said creativity equals currency. And he tells me the story of how when he was a young man, he was the guy that created the $5 meal deal. It was just so odd, right?
Wow.
Yeah, and he goes on to become president of Time Warner, and then Coca-Cola, and ownership in the Hawks, and all that stuff. But I remember him telling me that, and I'm like, there's this little Jewish man that's telling me creativity equals currency. And I'm a creative guy, being in the radio business for almost 3 decades. It's just now we as entertainers have control over our content, and that's going to drive the big companies nuts. The paycheck might not be there at the beginning, but the liberating feeling of being able to do it your way, as the great Frank Sinatra or Johnny Rotten said, right? I mean, there's that feeling that you're like, I'm Dane Cook, and now you get to see Dane Cook.
Right, but there's also a great feeling, and I'm sure you're experiencing this now with your own podcast success, away from what was more, I guess, traditional, tropes or what have you. What you're seeing is there's no, there's nowhere they can futz with the numbers where they can say, oh, the contract said downloads, and now we're doing something called hyper downloads. Or once the tech changes, then you end up never getting paid because your contract states the word streams or downloads. And that's where I try to mentor a lot of young comics and people in the industry to say that contract is locking you into a language that when they change their own company language, they're not thinking of you.
Mm-hmm.
They're not calling you and saying, we've changed the jargon so you can get paid quicker. No way. And so I implore any young person listening who wants to, stake their claim, especially in stand-up, to, get funny, get undeniably funny. But then if you can own and operate your own IP through YouTubes or through like whatever it is that you think is the hip way to get your word out, I promise you in the long run, your fans will appreciate it and your mortgage that gets to be paid will appreciate it.
Yeah, you might even be able to have 2 or 3 mortgages depending on how well you do. Did your career?
You never know. If you might become a Chris Rock, or you might hit a level that's like stratosphere. But the reality is most comics are working year to year, tour to tour, and I hope that this is a great success. Not just because at 30 years I love it and it's funny and I'm having the time of my damn life, but I hope it works so that it forces these other corporations to ease up on these bad deals and let a performer come in and just lease their stuff to you. Have a little skin in the game. You don't own it forever. Promote the hell out of this person because you care about their content, you care about their fans, and let them go about their way and let them get paid. What if one comic has one great special and then the rest of their life they're like, yeah, I partnered up with so-and-so and now I get a $5 deal meal every year instead of an actual paycheck.
Well, I know somebody that'd be very happy about that. Did your career?
Yeah, one guy.
Yeah, one guy. Did your career in the beginning have to go through the Comedy Store in LA?
The Comedy Store. I landed in LA and I was more of a Laugh Factory guy. But I started playing the main room at the Comedy Store and fell in love with it. And so, yes, I've done the store a ton, but I guess I wasn't born from the Comedy Store,
So you didn't have to wait out in line on, what was it, a Monday and wait for your name to be called and none of that stuff?
No, I walked into the Laugh Factory. I had been doing a TV show in LA for a year with Betty White. I played Betty White's grandson on a TV show. And I walked into the Laugh Factory and I said, hey, I'm going to be here for, a few months and this show's probably going to get canceled because it was not very good. Betty White was amazing, but I was like, so I'm probably, going to go back to Boston or New York with my tail between my legs because I don't think this is going to work for me out here. And the club owner, Jamie Masada, who owns the Laugh Factory, said, let me see what you can do. He put me up on stage and 2 kind of incredible things happened that night. One, when I came off stage, he said, this club is your home now. If you want to come in any night while you're here, you can come in and work out. The Sunset Boulevard is yours now. Come in anytime. So that was amazing. But even more importantly is the reaction I got from the crowd. I realized, man, if I stay in LA, I'm the only young, hip, next generation comic here. But if I go back to New York, I'm one of a bunch of guys that I think are some of the best up and coming comics. I'm coming up with Bill Burr. I'm coming up with Patrice O'Neill, coming up with Gary Gulman, and then like 12 other guys. So I stayed in LA and I decided I'm going to build my fan base out here where everybody was back east kind of competing for that stage time. And I think it was a happy accident that I was on a good, bad show for a little while.
Yeah. Well, let's just talk about Betty White. I mean, I've said it for years. My wife always said that I have 2 hall passes and one's Judge Judy and the other was Betty White. And I'm not joking. I always found her even as she got older, but what an American treasure. I mean, like you can call it quits now, Dane, and just tell stories of Betty White, right? I mean, that's how awesome that is.
Betty White, best story. Well, first of all, best hug you could ever get. Coming to set every day and the vibrant queen of television, Betty White,
Yeah.
big hug in the morning. But I'll tell you, one of the things she told me, I said, I love Golden Girls. Still to this day, one of the funniest, unbelievable writing. And I remember one day I said, Betty, I got to, now that I'm on the show for a few weeks, can I fanboy out here for a second and say, like, God, I loved you on the Golden Girls and all of you. And she said, you want to know something funny? Anytime you ever watch the show, if you see a rerun of the show, she said, anytime you see us look down at a sugar packet or if we look into our tea mug before we drink, she said, remember, we couldn't remember all our lines because they'd changed them last minute. So we would write them on the sugar packets or we would write things and tape them inside of the mug when we couldn't remember the line. So if you watch a rerun of Golden Girls, you'll see a lot of sugar packet holding and staring into their cup while they're talking.
That's phenomenal. What a great story. I love hearing stories I've never heard before.
Yeah.
So I would do if you don't mind, a little comparison with you being the OG. I would say, and I'm a Ryan Reynolds fan, and this is coming from the acting standpoint, but the demeanor. Ryan Reynolds has a Dane Cook demeanor to him, and comics usually adopt a style. And I know this from Ryan Reynolds' side of things because I heard Chevy Chase's wife say it at an event that Ryan Reynolds was a Chevy Chase fan. So that's kind of humor that Chevy Chase, and I love Chevy Chase, did. But he's got kind of a Dane Cook feel to it. Have you ever heard that before, that Ryan Reynolds might have ripped off your gimmick a little bit?
A lot of people have said that, and I think that era and what I was doing zeitgeist-wise from stand-up, I don't think it was – I think a lot of comics told me years later, man, even I was doing a little bit of your attitude. That was kind of working for people. So, yes, a little bit, but I also do know – I got inside scoop on something one day that I thought was kind of interesting. Way back when Ryan Reynolds and I were both in town auditioning, trying to make it, I had been offered a TV show at ABC Disney called, I think it was called like Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place was the original name. And I passed on it. And when I passed on it, I got a call from a buddy of mine. He said, I just went in and auditioned for a show that I know you passed on because the casting director had your tape playing and telling the actors, this is the energy and the attitude we want.
Wow.
And then Ryan Reynolds ended up getting that role.
Wow. That's fascinating.
I don't know. I worked with Ryan on Waiting years later, and we never had a chance to talk about it. He couldn't have been a cooler guy, and he's deserving of all the success he got, and Deadpool is amazing. But back then, I did hear a rumor that a lot of people saw my tape because the casting person said, do this.
That's great. I believe it. I totally can see it. And by the way, I say that as a compliment to all parties because I'm a fan of everyone. I wasn't trying to say that to be, crazy, wacky, zany type of thing. In 2006, Torgasm, which was a documentary that you did, and they had like 20 different shows. It was very popular. You did very well on it. You went out with Robert Kelly. I'm a big Robert Kelly fan. This is a comic that, hasn't seen, he's been doing it forever, but maybe not gotten the mainstream success like you have or some other comics. Are you still friends with Robert Kelly?
Man, I haven't talked to him in years. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that people are in the same circles, East Coast and West Coast especially. I don't know if it's just the time zone difference, but no, we kind of fell off, and it sucks. I just saw Burr. Me and Burr did a charity event together a few months back for a buddy of ours who passed away, and I was saying to Bill, I go, man, it kind of sucks sometimes to feel like everybody's lives, grew in different directions, because the reality is we were a graduating class. We were tight, man. Me, Bobby, Bill, Patrice, Gallman. There was a time in my life that, it was like a family that you're living together. So unfortunately, no, I don't talk to Bobby like I used to, but he's deserving of all the success that he's earned.
I had one of my funniest moments on the air with a comedian, and it was the first time that I had interviewed him, and I don't have a relationship with him, but I actually reached out to him when I was up in New York not that long afterwards. He was having like knee surgery and
Yeah.
whatever. But it was the first time I met him, and I was doing radio in Tampa at the time, and he comes in, and it's just your normal run of the mill kind of radio interview thing. And somehow my first wife time called me, and something about I wear a night guard because I grind my teeth. And holy shit, dude, he took that and made it I couldn't finish the interview. I was crying because and it all started with my night guard, but I mean, it's always the
Yeah.
goofiest, funniest things. And I will never ever forget that. And I will always hold Robert Kelly in the highest regard because of that bit. It was just so funny, like off the cuff improv.
Oh yeah, he's one of those. He's one of those guys that there was nothing you could throw at him on stage, or especially if something really real was happening in the room, he would point it out and he wouldn't let anything get by him. I mean, I think that's probably one of his strengths, was the ability to improvise in and out of anything, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's great. Chuck, you had a question for Dane Cook?
Yeah, Dane, I got to tell you, man, huge fan. I'm going to do the whole Betty White thing. I'm going to fanboy out for a minute. I got to tell you, so I saw you many, many years ago, and you had a bit about the killer bees, right? And I became a father, and my kids are always, scared of bees, stuff like that. So for years, I've been saying in front of my children, I'll punch a bee in the face, right? and then but they were so young, I couldn't go further. So about I don't know, a year ago, I'll never forget it. So when you told me Dane was going to be on, I was dying. So my son is 7. And I'm out there and I'm like, he's like, Dad, there's bees. And I'm like, what did I tell you? And he's like, I'll punch a bee in the face. And I was like, killer horses. Now that's some scary shit. And my kid goes into my wife and he's like, Dad said the S word. And I'm like, oh, but it was Dane Cook. It wasn't me. So I just want to let you know, man, huge fan, but that bit, that was amazing. And to this day, it's been all these years later. And now my kids are saying the same stuff, but thanks for that.
How is that, Dane?
Man, first of all,
go ahead.
I appreciate that, man. It's kind of fun, being the old bull on the hill. The greatest part of 30 years doing it is looking back and not even realizing at the time that some of the stuff that I was saying and putting out there, all you dream of as a comic is maybe a couple of things someday somebody's going to quote or remember. And to be able to sit on this call and share a moment like that, it blows me away. It's almost like, even though I've been doing it so long, it reminds me of year one, when you'd get a compliment from another comic saying, hey, I like that thing that you do. And it was like, wow, maybe I'll be sticking around for a little time. So I'm so glad, and I can't wait to hear from the new special what people lock onto, because I don't know.
That's all these 40-year-old dads are like, thank you, Dane, for getting me in trouble with my wife.
So the new special,
I'll take the hit.
But with the new special, we live in a different time, right? There's things that you kind of walking on eggshells. We saw everything with the Chappelle stuff and Netflix, and the cancel culture and all that stuff. Doing this special, did you take that into consideration, or were you just like, now balls to the wall?
Yeah. Totally. And I tell comics too that I talk to now, I said, listen, your job is to get canceled, apparently. That's how good you need to be.
Right. Yeah.
Your job is to get so good and to observe and report. And yes, now it used to be you're going to get heckled, or you're going to bomb, or you're going to be on the road and get a toothache that you can't fix for a couple of years because you didn't have benefits. That used to be everything with comedy. And now I go, oh, and by the way, if you're not getting canceled, or somebody online saying you suck and we don't want you around, like that's the markings of a winner.
Yeah,
in comedy.
That's what you want.
My special, I'm sorry.
No, I said that's what you want to do. It's almost like any publicity is good publicity, right?
Yeah, I look at it like this, man. Like, if you're observing and reporting on things that have happened to you, things that you've experienced in your life, I don't care what those words are, what the intimation is, like, you have the right as a comic to get up there and share whatever that is in real time, whatever that situation. But if you're a comic who gets up there and you're just gonna like try to tell somebody else's story, that's gonna get you canceled. That's the stuff that these days doesn't fly, is you not coming from a personal experience. So yes, it is people getting canceled because they're going to go up. Some white guy is not going to go up on stage and go, "Hey, let me tell you what it's like being a black guy in America." Like that stuff. If it used to be funny, I don't know why, but if it did, it's like that stuff is not gonna work. But everybody's gonna get at some point put on the firing line and stand up. And I'd be lying if I didn't say secretly behind the scenes, breaking news, we laugh about it. We love it. We love it. We call each other up. We go, I'm getting in a little hot water over here. And all that does is remind your fans why they love you in the first place, is because you're willing to sometimes look like an idiot or self-deprecate yourself into a corner, or just say something that's gnarly that makes people go, that's preposterous. Get that person out of here. And we all want to be disruptors. And so if you get canceled, or if people want to cancel me because of something I say in this special, good.
It's very difficult to explain to people things that entertainers have done that was once accepted that today you wouldn't even fathom. I mean, radio's the same way. I did a wet burqa contest one time, and I didn't get canceled. I didn't get protested or anything. And, yeah, I know. Like, Chuck, you're cringing right now.
You're on a list somewhere in the Middle East.
But it was funny. It was a funny bit. We're throwing water balloons at a chick in a burqa, and she had no clothes on underneath. That was funny at the time. I wasn't trying to get the cancel, didn't exist at the time, the word, but I was trying to have fun. Right, Dane? And then, like, some of the things that you maybe look back on stuff that you did in the past, you couldn't repeat now.
Well, first things first, I've never thrown a water balloon at a woman in a burqa, so let's separate each other on that regard.
Thank you, Dane. I was thinking the same thing.
Sorry, it was funny.
I don't subscribe to that page, my friend.
All right, sorry.
But in terms of like just that, the verbal timeouts that you get, again, it's why half your crowd's there in the first place. They want to hear you say something taboo, and then the other half these days is because they want to catch you. It's a gotcha industry, and so it's the new stand-up comedy, man. I'm telling you, it's not your father's stand-up comedy anymore. It's a whole new thing, and you got to be in real time with your stories and with your shtick. You can't formulate an act or a skit or something that people are going to go, man, you put a lot of thought into going after that person. It's just not going to fly.
Well, you've always had smart comedy, so the changing or evolving with the times, I don't think would be an issue for you. I mean, you're a long form storytelling, smart, intellectual comic. So, I think I can't wait to see this special. Before we let you go, Brandon, you got a question for Dane?
Yeah. Do you have any new up and coming comedians on your radar that you think is going to be kind of big here in the next few years?
Man, I love it. I love that you asked that, because I feel like every time I get on some kind of, whether it's a TikTok live or Twitter Spaces, I'm always meeting new comics that'll send me their link or, share their backstory, whatever it might be. I got to tell you, I brought this young woman on stage with me a couple of times, Leah Lamar, who I met through Clubhouse chat. And I kind of look at her as one of the people that she's ballsy, she's really funny, she's super entrepreneurial, and her crowd work is impeccable. I kind of would say, like, in a Bobby Kelly kind of way, like she could probably, I've heard her in interviews where they give her one topic and then it's just like out of the gate, she's on fire. So look for Leah Lamar's career to get really exciting.
I think I've seen her. I think she was at the Punchline opening up for someone at one time. I just Googled her real quick. There's
she's been on the road quite a bit.
There's a couple, one of Bill Burr's, I don't want to know if he's his protege or what, but great comic, Paul Verzi, New York guy. Paul's great. He and Bill are really close. They do.
Yeah, I've heard great things about Paul. Yeah.
And there's a really green up and coming female comic out of Atlanta, Catherine Blandford. She's currently out with David Spade and doing his tour. He found out about her and found her number and said, "Hey, you need to come join my tour," which I thought was really cool. So she's good.
You know who's been out there for a minute and always makes me laugh is Erica Rose.
Erica Rode.
Yeah, I think it's Rhodes, Rhodes.
Okay.
She's very funny.
Yeah, there's
a lot, man. There's a good crop of comics that are coming up, and I think what's making them great is they're not afraid to push the envelope, but they're also not afraid to do the commentary needed to protect themselves from getting canceled. It's almost like they know the joke, and then they're ahead of everybody because before you can pull their mic out of their hand, they're smart enough to have a bit of a backstory on why they're saying what they're saying. And I think that's super, super interesting to watch the next generations that's coming up through this, quote, cancel culture and how they're using it to their favor.
Yeah, use it to their advantage. It's funny how quickly we're able to figure that kind of stuff out. The new comedy special, October 4th. And then you'll have the premiere in IMAX at the TCL Chinese Theater. It is one of my fan favorites. I cannot thank you enough for all the time and just doing the show. So, Dane Cook, best of luck with this special. Please keep us in mind. You got anything else and you want to come back on? I loved having this conversation with you.
Oh, man, that means the world to me, and vice versa. If you guys, think that there might be something fun or interesting for us to jabber on, then you know where to find me as well.
All right, buddy. Good luck, and we'll talk soon. Thank you so much.
All right, fellas.
See ya. Bye-bye.